Hi, it's Leanne and I'm here today with a review of Washington Black by Esi Edugyan. This is the 7th book in my Man Booker Prize Longlist read-along this year. Now, I said when I read The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner that I expected that was going to be the most accessible book of the longlist this year. Turns out I was wrong. Now again, I still have 4 books to read, so it could be that I'm going to be wrong again, but at this point I will be very surprised if Washington Black is beaten in the most crowd-pleasing, just easy to follow narrative of this year's longlist. It's about a boy called Washington Black who is removed from working on the fields at a slave plantation in Barbados by Titch, who is the plantation owner's brother. And he goes to work with Titch, who is an inventor slash scientist slash naturalist, and basically ends up having lots of crazy adventures. So it is at heart an adventure story. It is very fantastical. It takes you around the world, from Barbados to Canada to the Arctic to London, and throughout there are wild inventions. There are very quirky characters. It is all quite unrealistic, which wasn't an issue for me to begin with anyway. I mean, adventure stories, we've all seen Indiana Jones. They're not meant to be particularly realistic. But in addition to this, this is an adventure story with a slave as the main character. And that is something that we don't tend to see. Washington Black, known as Wash in the story, he literally takes flight from his slave life. Titch has invented a flying machine called the Cloud Cutter, which they used to escape from the island, and which ends up taking them off on the adventures that they have to come. And Wash's story kind of becomes like an amalgamation of all of the lives that slaves never got to live. He's himself, he is quite an unrealistic character. He is plucked randomly basically because of his height by Titch, but he ends up becoming, he's almost like a child prodigy. He's an incredible artist. I want to say his reading is amazing, but actually I know there's one point when he's only just started reading and he reads this really complicated scientific title from I think it's a journal title or an essay or something that Titch has written, but then later on, a few chapters along the line, he says that he still struggles with his reading. So I don't know, that seems to have been an error in the plotting somewhere, but yeah, if his reading of this scientific journal is to be believed, he's quite a prodigy when it comes to reading as well. But again, I think this is because Esi Edugyan has kind of used him as an example, again, of all the lives that weren't lived and all of the people who have helped build our world. Later on in the book, Washington ends up helping to build the world's first aquarium, and he has to live with the fact that he's not going to get credited because of who he is and the colour of his skin. And so again, it's the people who've helped build our world but have received no credit for that, whether that be, you know, women, ex-slaves, you know, Native Americans, anybody who has been oppressed and were never given a chance to reach the potential that they could have done. So this is all a really good idea, and like I say, I was happy for this wild adventure to take place when it was kind of a cover for these themes that Esi Edugyan wanted to get across. But there were quite a few problems with this approach. the first problem is that both Washington Black and as the character and the narrative of the book are very unconvincing. The narrative doesn't really flow. The writing is completely fine in terms of language. It's not particularly exciting, but there's nothing bad about it. But the narrative feels quite disjointed at times, and Wash himself never feels like a fully rounded character. He feels like he's there as this cardboard cutout who is supposed to just represent millions of different people. And I think the idea could work very well, but you have to have your main character be a fully rounded character in himself. And it is quite a tricky idea to pull off, but this is the Man Booker Prize Longlist, and I feel like a book that's going to be nominated for the Longlist should have pulled that off. Another problem is from about 3/4 of the way through the novel, I don't know if it's the author or the editor, has completely lost faith in the reader and is basically stating the book's themes and intentions directly. So it just randomly has Wash make these grand statements about the life that he's living and all of the slaves that he left behind that he now has to live for, essentially. There's just no trust in the reader to be able to grasp this themselves. Even Titch, who I thought was the absolutely best character, he is a white man who would probably consider himself an abolitionist, but his feelings towards black people and towards slaves are it's quite ambiguous. It seems like he's done this really good thing in taking Wash out of the really brutal life that he is living, but it's very much for his own purposes, and he doesn't really want to have to live with the weight of kind of carrying Wash around and the responsibility. So while he does good things, it's not necessarily for good reasons, and I was really enjoying that. But then again, later in the book, Wash makes this realisation himself and challenges Titch on it with no real end result. And again, it just felt like the reader wasn't trusted to be able to see the ambiguity of Titch's character themselves, that they had to be kind of spoon-fed it. So, if you give us this story and this character and just tell a really, really fun story, then the themes should kind of just come through on their own. We don't need to be forced and have them forced down our throats, but it doesn't. And had Esi Edugyan done that, this would have been a very credible nominee, but none of the things that it seems to be trying to aim for end up working. And it was a really disappointing read in the end. I was really, really into it for like the first 2/3, 3/4, and then as soon as we just started being told how we were supposed to feel about it, my interest levels just completely dropped, and in the end I was just kind of rushing through it to get it finished. And yeah, a big shame. I don't think it will make the shortlist. I don't think it deserves to make the shortlist. It did have the potential to be on there, but nothing that this book is trying to do really worked for me. And so yeah, it's another one that I feel like the Longlist has been full of them this year, where I could see what could have been, that there's been a lot of potential in a lot of these books, and for whatever reason the potential just hasn't been reached, and in the end it's meant that the reads haven't been as fulfilling as they could have been. So yeah, another disappointing one, another non-shortlist contender for me. I will be back soon with a review of From a Low and Quiet Sea by Donald Ryan, which is my 8th book on the list. So I'm getting there. So I will see you soon. Bye bye.